provide all kinds of information, and we could incorporate it into the site that we have, except that, well, I mean, you guys know that story. We also need monitoring at the other refineries, and that's about to come. We identified the need to link the monitoring data to health data, and we've been thinking about how to do that as well. And there was at least one or two more.
What do you mean by that? For example, you'd say parts per million and then relate that to the asthma, or?
Yeah, so the reason that we care about what's in the air, most of the reason that we care about what's in the air is what effect it has on people's health. Making the link between the two is hard, and there are some like reference levels or screening levels set for what's a safe level, but those are very uncertain numbers. And if you look at the ones that are set by California, for example, and compare them to the ones that are set by the federal ATSDR, they can vary by an order of magnitude, and it's not like one agency is always more protective than the other, right? So they're really uncertain. So one of the things we could learn from monitoring data is we could make those numbers better if we were tracking health at the same time, for example, right? One of the additional needs was the ability to just report problems, right? If you see a flare, if you smell something, if Ed was just telling me a story about the smell, and could we pick it up on the aware? So we want the ability to put the data in the context of what people are smelling and seeing and flaring if it's happening, that sort of thing. Was there one more? No, okay. So those are additional needs, and I'll talk some about how we're trying to meet them. So far we have three main products, I would say, of this project. The first is our website, AirWatchBayArea.org, and so that is on the next slide. And this is our landing page. You'll see it has it's got a bunch of information, it's got several tabs. One for each community. So on the next slide, you'll see an example. If you go to the Richmond tab, this is what you initially see. There are some instructions at the top. And you've got graphs of the measured levels of a set of chemicals on the one side, and you've got a map on the other side that shows you which monitors you're looking at. So there are monitors highlighted in yellow there. And if you go to the next slide, yes?
Is that graph, are those graphs showing, because I can barely see, is that in parts per million or billion?
That's in parts per billion, yes. And you, yeah, these are in parts per billion. And the
black carbon.
Oh, yeah, except for the black carbon, which is micrograms per meter cubed. That's what we're just using the units that are being read off the monitors.
Sorry for the questions.
No, that's fine.
Taken up in your working group, but did you have much of a debate about how to present those graphs in parts per billion or million? That became a huge issue when we were designing a website for our particular monitors who were in the trailer, et cetera. If we were to put up, we were designing at that point a website, and we're getting agreement between Valero and the community and the city. But one of the key debates was how you present information on the graph for particular chemicals.
So this was a process that included community members, but not refinery representatives or the Bay Area Air Quality Management District on purpose, because we had learned a bit from your experience. And so what we decided to do, and it was a subject of some discussion, but I wouldn't say debate per se, What we decided to do was indicate the screening level, right? And that's at this border between the red and the gray. And to indicate the detection limit, okay? So as not to make it appear that just because something is not detected that it's 0, right? So it puts into context. In this bottom part, we have no information because it's below the detection limit. In this gray area, well, that's a gray area. We know it's detected, we don't know what it means for health, and anything in the red area is above a health screening level. So that's how we decided to do it. In my mind, to make the point that there really is there's a gray area there, and also to show that there's the detection limit matters too, because you can see in the benzene, the detection limit is halfway to the screening level. Okay, so the next slide. This shows in a little more detail. So the last graph that you saw was the data for 1 day's worth. Here we've zoomed into this shows a whole month from the middle of March to the middle of April. So you can zoom in or out. And the red line will then show you, what the actual values are at that moment. And there's an arrow, the wind direction, and you can, press play and animate this too, right? The red bar, you can make the red bar scroll across and see how the wind changes over time. Yes?
So I have a question. On what you're measuring, does each one of those have a standard for measurement? Or, for instance, some are toxic air contaminants that not all contaminants are listed as TACs, and because they haven't gone through the process of getting classified that way. So do we have a composite of different types of pollutants that have various degrees of agency standards?
Yes, we didn't sort them quite that way. So where we get the data is directly from a website called fenceline.org, which is where the data from the Richmond and the Crockett and Rodeo monitors is reported to. We weren't, because of the refineries wanting to control that data, we weren't able to get the data directly from the monitors, so we have to scrape it off the website. So as it appears on the website, we take a copy of it, right? We yank the number and put it into our data. And fenceline.org actually reports quite a few more chemicals than are listed here. And in our process, our participatory process with the community, we decided which ones were most important to us. And we ended up with what are called the BTEX compounds, the known carcinogens, benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, and xylene. Sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, which are very much associated with refinery emissions and also have very well-known health effects. And then the other one we have is black carbon, which is also thought to be to have pretty bad health consequences, although. So I would say that except for black carbon, they all have regulatory, enough regulatory attention that there are reference limits, like OEHA has reference limits. Black carbon was much more of a, we were much less certain, and it's much less studied. It seems to be just coming on. So that's the exception. And we ended up using some standards for diesel particulates, which we think is a good proxy. And I forget where the standards came from. They might have come from the World Health Organization or something. But they did, all of the standards that we used came from a well-reputed agency.
Okay, and then one more question.
Yes.
And so the gray area is the area of uncertainty about the direct connection to public health, or?
I mean, that's the area between the detection. It's where something is detected and hasn't exceeded a health limit set by an agency. And it's just a gray area because we know that it doesn't, or we suspect that it doesn't necessarily exonerate the chemical just because it hasn't passed the level set by an agency. Marilyn?
So is that caveat expressed that the gray area actually represents possible low-level detections where the caveat being there hasn't been studies about, let's say, any particular chemical at low-level exposures over time?
Or synergistic effects.
Synergistic combos of these, what you would call typically, these are typical, those that you chose are typical emissions from refineries. They're like signature gases. So at least that's what Don Gamilis, I had learned from him.
Mm-hmm.
So the caveat is the literal gray area of our knowledge about the actual health effects of these kinds of things that are chronic in our ambient air in the vicinity of refineries.
Yeah.
Or can be, at low levels, yes.
Right. On the prior page, or the prior slide, so when you see this introduction piece, so we struggled with how much information can we put on one page. And so we wanted that kind of explanation to be here somewhere, but it wouldn't fit. So it ended up, there are a couple of, yeah, it's this one. There are, short things that explain what the site is about, and there are a couple of places where it says more, and you can click. And so if you expand this point, it will tell you that stuff. Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
not to belabor the point, and I want you to get through everything because I have to leave, so I want to make sure I get everything. But those standards are set by a very political process.
Yeah.
And I think it would be helpful for the public to understand that that is not necessarily driven by all the, what you might call the normal ways of doing with scientists connecting cause and effect and results. And so it is an accepted political process. That's what we've done in California, and it ought to be explained that it's very different than what's done in Massachusetts, which does a very public health driven process. Ours is done differently.
I will be in touch to learn more about that from you. I wasn't aware of how different the processes were.
We're going to do a time check.
Okay.
4:30 and
All right. So why don't we hold questions till the end? I'm enjoying being able to do this, but you're right that if we continue with the leisurely pace, we might not get through. So the next slide, please. Now, okay, again, in Benicia, as we've talked about, we don't have the same level of information. And so what we did was we got a commercial off-the-shelf monitor, and we set it up at Ed Russell's Woodworks, and that's a generous we. Ed set it up, and we hacked it so that we could get the data off of it because the manufacturer actually doesn't want you to be able to do this. And we are able to see how the air quality fluctuates.
What kind of monitor?
It's called an AWAIR, A-W-A-I-R. And again, it's off the shelf. It was about $200. And our colleagues in Pittsburgh use these fairly extensively, so they had experience. What they have found is that there's some creep in the absolute values on the VOCs. So what this measures, it measures particulates in parts per billion, and it measures total volatile organic compounds in parts per billion. Okay, so it's not as fine-grained a measurement, but it can show you some of the fluctuation. So it's something. We don't have the same kind of health standards to compare these two. I also don't think we're as confident in the values here to compare those, but But this is what we have for Benicia so far. Okay, the next slide, please. All right, so that's the website, and I encourage you to go mess around with it and give us feedback as you have it. From the website, you can get daily summaries. So we have created this automated a process of creating daily summaries. And what it does, and maybe the next, if you click one more time, it'll sort of blow up a piece of this. Okay, so this is this part sort of blown up. It'll tell you the maximum 1 hour average. So for any given hour, what was the worst hour? What was the average pollution level for that worst hour of the day? And it's a rolling hour, so you see in this example, this was April 2nd in Rodeo. The hour was between 2:45 and 3:45 in the afternoon. And it was measuring benzene at 8 parts per billion when the health level is 1 part per billion, so it tells us we're more than 8 times the health limit, tells you what direction the wind is coming from, and then it tells you for that 24-hour period. Okay, so this isn't a rolling average, but for, from 12 a.m. April 2nd to midnight April 2nd, right? It is for almost 4 of those 24 hours. Benzene was detected above the detection limits. Okay, so that's the kind of report we get. And again, because we're not as confident of the AWARE data, we only get this from the Rodeo and Richmond monitors. But you can subscribe to these. And if you subscribe to, so there are 3 ways to look at them. You can either go on the website and do yesterday's daily summary. So there's a place you can click and you can get that in a printable format. You can subscribe to to have the summaries sent to your email, and they'll only get sent on days when there was something going on, right? Where there was something detected at an unusual level. And in most cases, anything at all detected is unusual. There are a couple of compounds, the black carbon and the ozone, read pretty much all the time. But the H2S, for example, it's not detected all the time. So on days when something is going on, you'll get a daily summary at the end of the day that has this for each chemical that was detected. And that seems to be happening, and you can also look at an archive of those. That seems to be happening it seems like a third of the days, half of the days, there seems to be something detected. So it's not every day across the 4 monitoring sites, right? The 3 in Richmond and then the 2 in Rodeo and Crockett. Okay, so that's the daily summaries. We can move to the next. Okay. And now here's the part that's probably the most relevant for Benicia at the moment, which is the AirWatchBayArea app. So on your cell phone, for the iPhone or for Android, you can download an app. And what this app does is it has just 2 little tabs. One says how does the air smell, and you can report, on a scale from it's fine to it's as bad as it gets. It asks you to report, to describe the smell, to describe any symptoms, and then there's a free space for comments. And then those reports will appear on a map. And you can look at that. And then along the bottom of the map, you have a progression of days, right? There's a square for each day. And those squares are lighter or darker depending on how many bad reports there were, right? So in Pittsburgh, where they use this a bunch, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania again, we borrowed this from the Create Lab in Pittsburgh. Some of the boxes down here will be light gray, and some of them will be dark gray, and some of them will be really dark gray, depending on how many people reported bad smells. There's some push notification and so this automatically logs your location and puts the triangle wherever you happen to be. It color codes the dots, and then if somebody reports a smell of a 5, there will be a notification sent out to everyone who's subscribed that says, so how does your air smell? And you can say just fine, or you can say, oh, it really is a 5. I don't think the push notification tells you somebody reported a 5. I think it just says, how's your air? And so in that way, it generates additional data. So this is a way of generating information that can then be correlated to the quantitative data that the monitors are collecting. And it's a way of generating data even where we don't have quantitative information from monitors. If you go to the next page, you'll see we have it set up so that the smell reports have their own row alongside the monitoring data. So these are all sort of tester reports. But you can see how, we might eventually, you could imagine, we would see a spike of hydrogen sulfide and then we'd see a cluster of dark dots, right? So it doesn't appear on the app this way, but this is what the website will then look like from the information coming in from the app, if that makes sense. Okay, the next slide. Okay, and so things that we're still working on. Linking up the reports from the app, the website, and reporting to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Okay, so there is a need we've identified in our working group to have reports go to the air district, but also to keep a copy for the community, and not just keep a copy for individuals, but to kind of keep an archive of community reports so that community people can follow up on them. And it would be nice to be, some people are saying it would be nice to be able to report from the website too, and the three systems at the moment don't link up well. And I hope to have a programmer interning with me this summer who will, I told him that his job is to make them link up. We'll see. I said that we had a need for health data. And so one of the things that we are doing, we have a pilot project going where in Crockett and Rodeo currently, and hopefully eventually in Richmond, we're having people use Fitbits and pulse oximeters to take health-related measurements in real time, personal health-related measurements in real time, so that we can see if they show any correlations to the real-time air monitoring data. Now, it's a pilot project in that we don't know whether you can see any correlations. It could be that the health data are too noisy. They're too sensitive to a bunch of other things that have nothing to do with air quality. Although we think we may have found some correlations to blood oxygen levels, which is what the pulse oximeter measures. And we are also hoping in the process of that to correlate the AWARE and a UV hound, which is one of the real-time monitors, the fancier real-time monitors that I think is part of your system. I think that's one of the things in the trailer as a UV hound, is that right? Yes. Yeah. So we hope to learn more by putting those two things next to each other. We hope to learn more about the AWARE. We have experimented with taking time-lapse photography of refineries, and we'd like to include the visual alongside the quantitative and the experiential data, right? But we're still working on that. We still haven't given up. We find that there's not as much visible emissions from a refinery as there would be from some other kind of, a power plant or a coke works, which is where they did this very successfully. So we're still investigating that. And the last piece is what Constance was saying, that we are at the point where we've got some set of tools that are ready for people to use. And now we'd like to get people using them and giving us feedback on how they can be made more useful and more usable. But just get people using them. I mean, I spoke with the Air District this morning. I gave them a version of this presentation. And one of the things that they said about the Smell app was that that's the kind of information they could use if there were, if there were lots and lots of, right, with lots of users and with lots of reports, then they could actually do something with it. If it's just a trickle, it's not, right? So some of the efficacy of these projects, of this project, depends on having people really, participation. I think there's one more slide. Okay, so how you can get involved at this point. Please do go and sign up for those daily summaries and just, have a look at what we're not exactly sure what one of the things I was asking the Air District is, so when we see something going on, then what? And they didn't have a great answer. But at least we can start to have more of us be getting those in our inbox and looking at them and saying, it's really odd that there were about 5 days at the end of March, beginning of April, that benzene levels in Rodeo were high. Wonder what that's about, right? And so then that becomes something to investigate. Download the app and report smells and events on it. We also are at a point in the process with the Air District where they are receiving monitoring plans from the refineries. They're due on Thursday, 2 days from now, April 20th. And the staff will then make a recommendation on whether those monitoring plans should be accepted. It sounds like they are prepared to be quite critical of the monitoring plans. And so there might be a little iteration, but eventually they will make a recommendation. And then there will be a public comment period. There will also be a series of public workshops around the community monitors that the Air District is going to establish. And I think participation in those processes is key. One of the things, and there are many things to advocate for in those processes. One is kind of ongoing quality assurance and testing of the monitors and seeing how good the data are. But one is just saying the data need to be made public. And not just put up on a website so you can look at what's there right now, but actually the raw data need to be made available. And what I'm advocating for is that there be what's called an API for all of the data, that all of the data come with an API, which is a way for programmers to basically grab it before it goes to a website, and so that they can pull it into whatever platforms they're using. It's called an application programming interface, I think. And as you do these things, please be in touch. Let me know how it's looking and what suggestions you have, or let Constance or Kathy know, because we're all in good touch, and we can start to incorporate that feedback. So just the last slide, 2 more slides. These are the people who have been working with me, and I'd like to thank especially our programmer, Amy Gottsagen. She was wonderful, and we're sorry that she has decided she needs to learn other things in her undergraduate program. And I'd like to welcome Cheryl Holtzmeyer, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at Drexel University, well, employed by Drexel University on this project, but residing here in the Bay Area, so that she can be on the ground for helping with outreach and planning events. And so she is also a good person for you to know, good contact person. And if you want to know more about our work, you can go to our website, which is on the next slide. So this is my research group's website if you want to know more about the overall context of what we're up to. So thank you all very much for having me. I'm happy to have had the chance to talk to you about it, and I think we have, what, 10 more minutes for questions, if anybody has any?
Ed's going to show something, but I just want to
good.
see the
Okay.
brilliance of all of this. Some years ago, I listened to a presentation by Don Camillus of Argo Scientific, and he was talking about, how Chevron in Richmond was so pleased to say that when people called up and said, all this stuff is coming our way, they said, it's not from us. And so right now it seems independent information, but what this project does is shows you all the refineries in the North Bay area, because we're in a chain of, 7 major refineries?
There are 5, yeah.
And you can, 5 major refineries, and you can see, you can look at what the wind direction is, and you can see what's coming down the Carquinez towards us, and from us off to Davis, etc. So it's a really, I think it's just a fundamental brilliant stroke of bringing things together.
I pass this around so you could see. This is the AWARE, A-W-A-I-R is the product name. Okay, this is what it looks like on your tablet. It measures 5 things: temperature, humidity, CO2s, VOCs, and it'll tell you specifically which ones, and also particulates. It's designed to put into your baby's room, or if you have problems and you're looking for sleep. So it has an overall score, and it gives you an average score, and it'll tell you whether it's good, and it reflects all those different items and combines them. Okay, we're using it because it's only $200 and it's easy to install. You can see the little lights there up on the eaves. That's the actual device. It's no bigger than this, and it has a little power cord, and then it's connected to the Wi-Fi. If you could go to the next slide. This is some of the data we're seeing, and go ahead and go to the next one. I think it's the same slide but a better angle. Okay, this is April 1st, and it's measuring VOCs, and you can see the average is somewhere 500-600 or something, but there's a spike of 1,300 parts per billion. And we don't know what that means or whether that's relevant, what components it is. It measures things like solvents and so forth, essentially, is the VOCs that they're targeting there. They'll tell you in their app which ones they're looking at. Okay, so it's a very simple device, but it gives you a tremendous amount of data. If this one gets taken away from us, we will probably buy our own, and maybe have multiples in our own site. It's so helpful. And just to wrap up briefly, unless anybody has any questions, one of the things you could see here is if you put your finger on it, you could get actual data and see the time and the peaks and so forth, and it's taking samples every 5 minutes. So for $200, it's telling you a lot of information. In communicating with the developers of this device, they only respond to emails, and they're saying, you can't put it outside, it doesn't like the weather. It's one of the things we see is very high particulate levels sometimes, and that's probably because we have 100+% humidity and Thule fog and those kind of conditions. So
That's a human health issue to do with the weather and temperature and whether heavy molecules are falling.
Sure.
There's no wind or whatever, and
Yeah.
yes, particulates will increase.
Yeah. So one of the interesting issues of this device is it only records data for 5 days and then it's gone. So through the miracle of what Gwen's team has done is they've preserved that data by putting it on to the AirWatch program, and then you could go all the way back and see when this was installed. If you go back to on or about March 8th is when they had the startup at the refinery. Do you remember the date you called the Air District? Okay. By the way, I have the Air District's complaint line on my speed dial. If you call at night, you get very nice people who take your information. They almost always follow up during the daytime. If you call during the day, they will blow you off and say, oh, that's the refinery, they make smoke. They don't want to they do not want to take your report. But because I'm from my place of business, I could see the refinery pretty much constantly. I call them up all the time, And generally, I get a call back from their site inspector, and we're on first name basis, and he'll tell me what's going on. Oh yeah, they had a startup or they had a compressor failure. They will tell you about a specific incident, but not about, in general, oh, we've had this many complaints or, okay?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, unless there's any other questions, or if you want to stay after, I could show you some more of this.